From Kyle's Sam Crow tattoo being removed aggressively by fire, to Otto biting his own tongue off and throwing it across an interrogation room, here are Sons of Anarchy moments that keep fans coming back. Right from the beginning, many of us realized how crazy this show was gonna get, like when Kyle Hobart's tattoo was painfully removed. It all started when our former Sam Crow member left poor Opie hanging at a crime scene, and a betrayal like that got him kicked out of the club. But Kyle, being the bold guy he is, manages to arrange a special visit to see his son's band play at a fundraiser in Charming. He thinks everything's cool, and his coming back won't cause that much trouble, until Jax notices he's still sporting Sam Crow's ink on his back, when he was supposed to get that blacked out after being thrown out of the gang. So what happens next? Well, Hobart gets cornered at the club, and the guys make him choose between fire or knife to get rid of the tattoo. I mean, it's not like both of those options seem incredibly gut-wrenching, huh? In the end, though, the banished Sam Crow member chooses to play with fire, and in one of the nastiest set of events, the MC chains him up in the garage and brings out the blowtorch. No doubt seeing this guy's back becoming the canvas for some unconventional tattoo removal, while the whole MC watched in silence, made it clear that these guys don't mess around. And this episode also effectively set the tone for the insanely rough moments that were waiting for us in the upcoming episodes. Not gonna lie though, some of those ruthless instances feel real good when it's done for the right reasons, like when Sam Crow shows their version of justice for a victim of violence. This happens when Elliot Oswald seeks the club's help after his daughter is attacked at a carnival. The guy, being a wealthy landowner, wants justice, and he knows the Sons are the ones to deliver. Now, Clay Morrow steps up to take action. But things get a bit twisted when we find out what his true intentions are. You see, Elliot has plans to sell some prime Charming land that could attract big businesses, and Clay sees this as a threat to Sam Crow's operations. So he takes advantage of the situation and strikes a deal with Elliot. Well, that's not very knight in shining armor of him, is it? But Elliot, at this point, is so desperate that he agrees to let Morrow find the abuser, and in return he would take care of business for the club. By that, I obviously mean he would do something quite terrifying. So when the time comes, Sam Crow makes sure the ends up in Elliot's hands. The plan then is to castrate the guy, sending a clear message to never mess with the MC or Oswald. But right at the last moment, the dad has a change of heart. Not wanting to get his hands dirty, he steps aside. That's when Clay steps up, puts on his gloves, and takes matters into his own hands. Literally. After the deed is done, he then orders the club members to let the guy bleed out and bury him in a shallow grave. That's certainly one brutal way to settle the score. But not gonna lie, seeing an abuser getting the taste of his own medicine did feel incredibly satisfying. On the other hand, I'll tell you what didn't feel good. It was the time Opie's life ended in the most tragic way possible. But the reason why this was such a crucial moment in the show is because, as Jax's oldest friend, Opie Winston was the definition of love, loyalty, and hell. Even brutality when the situation called for it. That's why when he found himself in the slammer alongside Chibs, Tig, and Jax, under the grip of the ruthless Damon Pope, fans were scared for him and wondered how he'd managed to get himself out. The situation got worse when it seemed like Pope wasn't going to let them off easy. Then, the four men also discovered that one of them would become a sacrificial lamb and thrown into a deadly prison brawl with the odds stacked against them. But this is when Winston, in the act of sheer bravery, headbutts an officer, effectively putting himself in harm's way so that Jax or the others wouldn't be selected. Can you imagine the horror and anguish Jax must have at that moment, seeing his best friend being led away? The scenes became 10 times more emotional when Opie looked back at him through the glass saying, "I got this." Gosh, that sent chills down our spines because we knew exactly what was coming next.
I got this.
Armed with a pipe, Winston tried to fight off multiple men, but sadly, he was unable to stick it out. In the end, he receives a fatal blow to the back of his head with his own weapon. Man, it's never easy seeing one of the main characters in the show experience something so violent. In the same way, it was truly heartbreaking when Gemma finally told her family, about the cruel things she had to go through by a far-right fascist gang. In Season 2, Lone comes to town, and they decide to flex their muscles by tricking Sam Crow into a declaration of war. Their chosen method, though, ends up being the brutal assault of Gemma Morrow, who's the wife of the club's president. In the aftermath of this incident, Morrow, being the strong-willed woman she is, doesn't let her attackers have the upper hand, so she keeps the information about her assault to herself until she chooses the right moment. And boy, the time she ends up picking is so powerful. You see, when her son and husband are on the verge of completely separating, with Jax deciding to quit Sam Crow and go nomad, Gemma takes matters into her own hands and reveals the truth about her attack to both of them. It's a big power move because she manipulates the situation by bringing Jax and Clay back together, knowing they would both forget about their differences and help bring justice to their family. But the reason this scene is also incredibly moving is because Mrs. Morrow not only sets her pride aside and focuses on reuniting the two men who mean the world to her, she also liberates herself from the tragic experience. No doubt, characters overcoming their terrible past incidents is one of the reasons that makes this show so fulfilling to watch. On a lighter note, though, it's also nice seeing people in this community getting their happily ever afters, and it especially warmed my heart seeing Tig Traeger falling for Venus in Season 7. I mean, we got to see what is possibly the most beautiful relationship moment in the show when the two lovebirds have an emotional talk and Tig professes his desire for her to be all his. The moment is iconic because it's the most honest version of the character we've ever seen. But the scene was also shocking because it showed that even now, after nearly 7 whole seasons of crime and scars, Sons of Anarchy managed to surprise us by showcasing some tenderness on screen. I also think none of us imagined Venus Van Dam, a transgender woman working in the adult industry, would end up having such a major impact on Tig when she was first introduced in Season 5. Hell, we all believed her showing up was just a one-off outrageousness. After all, this show is all about hypermasculinity. But guess what? The show kept bringing Venus back, and her relationship with Tig allowed both characters to grow. Not gonna lie, it's kind of bizarre that you can find sympathy for a psychotic murderer only because he says he's in love, but hey, that's Sons of Anarchy for you. Speaking of being odd, I'm sure this series wouldn't be complete without Otto and his life filled with unexpected events. The one scene that has got to be the most whack, though, is when he bit off his own tongue while he was being held for a crime. Safe to say this guy doesn't hold back when it comes to chaos. Because before he harmed himself, Delaney killed a nurse with a crucifix that Tara gave him. As you can imagine, this incident clearly angers the nurse's brother, ex-US Marshal Lee Torek, who then pays a visit to the prison. But when Otto is brought into the interrogation room, he does something that shocks everyone in the room. The guy slams his chin on the table with such force that he bites off his own tongue. He then throws it right across the room at the one-way glass window where Torek is watching. Guess what he does next, though? With his mouth full of blood and probably in pain, Otto manages to let out a laugh. How insane is that? So there you have it. From Otto biting his own tongue off and throwing it across an interrogation room, to Kyle's Sam Crow tattoo being removed aggressively by fire. These were Sons of Anarchy moments that fans kept coming back to.